6010. Focus, fantasy focus.
Hello and welcome into Fantasy Focus Football presented by Boost Mobile. My name is Daniel Dopp here with Field Yates and Mike Clay. Guys, Week 6 kicks off tonight, Thursday Night Football, 49ers and Seahawks. I'm ready for another week of football. How about you guys?
Go. I'm ready as well. I got to apologize before we get too far into the show to our director, Dan, who's joined the team relatively recently, done a great job. We might be the most annoying people to work with, especially when it's the three of us on the show, because like 3 minutes prior to the show, Dan was like, just a heads up, guys, we're 3 minutes away. And the three of us were talking about something completely nonsensical, not related to the show at all. Then it was like a minute and a half, and Dan was like, all right, guys, we're 90 seconds away. And we're like, yeah, thanks, Dan, we got it. No problem here. And then like 15 seconds before the show, he was like, 15 seconds to the show. Can we start this thing? Are you guys going to shut up?
Are you guys okay?
So sorry to Dan. We were talking about Mike's awesome fantasy hockey team. He has a great dynasty league team. Amazing.
I do. I have Austin Matthews and Connor McDavid. So I'm not that great at fantasy hockey because I don't follow it as meticulously as football. But I've just been riding those two guys for the last decade, and that's been good enough to win a few titles.
It's worked.
Hey.
Yeah,
Not need much else.
For you. Yeah. Hey, speaking of some titles, is there a chance that my Detroit Tigers are going to make it to the World Series? Holy cow, who would have called that?
Series, it's baseball.
It is baseball.
That is baseball.
Okay.
So I'll just quickly, and you guys, Daniel probably is more invested this year because of the Tigers.
I'm more invested in the last 2 weeks. I didn't.
Okay. So then we're in the same boat then, because I was
Yes.
going to say, I'm not the biggest baseball guy. During the summer, it's a quiet football time. We're usually doing things with our family and enjoying, different parts of life that are harder to find during the football season. Also, it's nice weather out.
Yeah.
Sun stays out until 8:30 during the peak of the summer. That I don't get as emotionally invested in baseball. The playoffs rule.
Yes.
I'm sorry for Mike. I don't care who wins the Mets or the Phillies, but last night I was watching it and I'm like, Frankie Lindor just made himself a legend forever.
Dude.
One swing, and he was already he's one of the best players in the entire planet, but those moments make baseball playoffs really, really cool. Sorry, Mike.
Yeah, I used to be into it. I grew up a Braves fan for some
that's
reason.
right.
I don't know why, but now that I don't really pay attention, I kind of just, I still like the Braves, but kind of root for Philadelphia, of course, where I'm from. So,
all right.
Yeah, it's a weird dynamic.
It is a weird dynamic.
Good luck to the Tigers. It would be an
sports are
amazing story, really an amazing story if they were to advance to the ALCS, and they're a very, very easy team to root for.
All right, so that's baseball, now NASCAR.
Love it. All right.
We have the Roval this week, big one.
Literally no idea.
I don't know anything about NASCAR.
Jeff Gordon.
One of these days, Mike
still
keeps
race?
saying I need to get you guys to a race with me. I'm just
Yeah, we
waiting
do.
for the actual invite to come
to
in my
Charlotte.
inbox. Have you gotten one yet, Field?
Nope, certainly haven't.
All right. Hey, Memorial
Absolutely
Day
not.
every year.
All right.
Feels like, I have to hang out with my kids and my family.
All right, on today's show, we're talking about some start-sit decisions that we've got to make, as well as a few players that may or may not be on the rise. And, of course, with it being Thursday Night Football, we are going to dive into the Thursday Night Football preview. But first, let's kick things off with the opening drive. And we are talking about Michael Pittman Jr. Michael Pittman Jr., unfortunately, in this one, dealing with a back injury that'll sideline him for multiple games.
Kind of came out of nowhere yesterday.
Yeah.
did.
We don't know yet. The team has not decided whether or not they're going to put him on IR, but no Michael Pittman Jr. for a handful of games. Let's talk about that, as well as another wide receiver that maybe missed some time yesterday at practice as well for this wide receiving crew.
For what it's worth, and I could be wrong, I usually interpret when one of the national reporters, obviously Shefty most often leading the way, mentions the possibility of IR. I usually interpret that as IR is the most likely outcome. I don't know if that's wrong or right.
I think you're right.
They're not sure if it's going to be IR, but
when
that
it's
means
mentioned as an option, it usually trends that way. So I'm interpreting this as probably at least 4 games missed for Michael Pittman Jr. You mentioned that Josh Downs also, or you were alluding to it. Josh Downs missed practice yesterday with a toe injury. We don't know the severity of that, but let's talk about Michael Pittman Jr. and what kind of player he has been so far this season. He is 20th in the NFL in total targets. He is 15th in the NFL in target share, just over 26.2%. He has not been as good this year as he was last year. I don't think that Michael Pittman Jr. has changed as a player. I think 2 things have happened. A, astronomical volume dropped. B, at least through the first, I would call 3 games of the season, quarterback play was worse, right? Yes. Anthony Richardson was not throwing the football as well as Gardner Minshew was last season, but this is big news here. If Josh Downs plays, Mike, I do see some real value here in this player who over the past couple of weeks has been extremely busy.
Yeah, this is super interesting with both of those guys dealing with things because they're responsible for, 58% of their targets this season, something like that. It's kind of wild, at least when they've both been healthy. So, but definitely big. Pittman going out is going to open the door for targets for some other players. The thing about Downs is, like, again, he already has a 29% target share since he's been back. I don't know that it's going to go up much. So I think he's going to kind of be, where he is moving forward, maybe down actually a little bit from that because it's such an astronomical number, but there's no doubt he's going to be featured. One thing I will say, though, about Pittman is it's like he started to heat up the last couple of weeks. He actually had his lowest last week with Joe Flacco, his lowest target share in a game since week 18 of 2022.
Wow.
So
I don't think much changed over the past 2 weeks other than the quarterbacks playing a bit better and him finding the end zone.
yeah, I mean, but he was starting to heat up there with Richardson. Like half of his yards came on a drive and a half with Richardson a couple weeks ago. So
sorry, I was saying like he wasn't heating up. The quarterback play got better.
No,
That's
no,
what I
doubt
meant,
I'm
right?
saying from a fantasy perspective,
Yeah.
he's getting back on track. So I say that because there's some confidence that down the road when he's back, he'll be back on track and be a viable fantasy starter. But yeah, this week if Downs goes, I mean, he's going to be a lineup lock. I would say I moved him into the lineup lock status for the playbook, which should be out today, and then it opens up the door for some other receivers here as well.
Yeah, so if Downs does play, I agree. Like he's going to be locked into my lineup.
Yeah,
He got
no doubt.
21 targets over the past 2 weeks, and he's only running like 67% of the routes for this team right now. But he's one of those guys that, like, when he's on the field and running a route, like he's often amongst the primary targets, right? Like because it's the shorter area stuff, it's the plays that allow him to run after the catch. If he's not on the field, I don't really know. And even if Pittman, like even with Pittman's absence, I don't exactly know what to make of Alec Pierce. One of the wildest profiles right now amongst all receivers. All right, so he leads all players in yards per catch. You know what the number is?
Yes, I saw it. Well, I know it's super high. His yards
28.3.
and his yards per target is a little over 21 yards, which is even more wild.
His air yards per target is north of 25. 25 air yards per target. But how about this? Alec Pierce. Think about how long. It's 5 games for Alec Pierce. That's basically 2 games for Josh Downs. Josh Downs in the past 2 weeks, 21 targets. Alec Pierce all season, 17 targets.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
17 targets. When was the last time he had more than 7 targets in a single game?
College?
No, it was
Not that far back.
probably- It wasn't. I don't think it was last season, was it?
Not. It was
the year
2022,
before.
so
yeah.
it's rookie season. So he's a really, really interesting player. I hate when I use this profile because sometimes people get mad because he hasn't played well recently. But he has some good Marquez Valdez-Scantling in him, right? Like, can do some serious damage on limited targets, but can also go and become a zero. So naturally, you would think if Pittman Jr. is out, that Alec Pierce moves up a little bit. I think he will, but I still think he's vulnerable to a feast or famine mentality because of the way he plays.
Yeah, agree 100%. 77th in targets, 11th in yards so far. That's just not sustainable. It's just not going to work that way. It's been the variance has kind of gone his way so far. Those deep shots have dropped in and been, has allowed him to put up some big fantasy days. But again, I have him ranked closer to 50 than I do 20 this week, where his numbers are so far this season. And speaking of guys who just get targeted when they're on the field, did you realize that last week A.D. Mitchell had 7 targets on 11 routes? Yeah. When he's been on the field, they have thrown it to him. Actually, this season, 20 targets on 59 routes. He has more targets than Alec Pierce. So, he's going to be heavily involved as well, a guy you can add to your roster. I think Downs is clearly the best play from this wide receiver room, and then Pierce would be second because of that. It's boom bust, but vertical roll, and then Mitchell's. I'm not. You can put him on your bench, but I would say Pierce and Mitchell aren't necessarily startable in this matchup.
That's sort of what I was going to alluding to with this, because as much as you like it when you have these guys be able to finally get opportunities in this offense or potentially get more opportunities, this Titans secondary has not been, they have not been allowing a ton of fantasy points, fewest amount of fantasy points to the wide receiver position.
And you want some numbers here?
Yeah, bring it.
Fewest yards, fantasy points, 0 touchdowns to receivers. Now, they've only played 4 games. They had the bye, but still dominance through 4 games. How many wide receivers have reached 11 fantasy points against them? They played the Bears, really good trio. The Jets have Garrett Wilson. They played the Ravens, Zay Flowers. The Packers receivers, Malik Willis game, but the Packers receivers. How many have gotten to 11 fantasy points in a game this season?
19?
I'm going to say 27.
All right, real answers?
2.
I would say 3.
0.
Wow.
0 receivers have 11 fantasy points. So something to think about, when you're considering other options. But again, a Downs hard to bench, but everyone else. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a new hack, by the way. When someone asks me like a very leading question where it's like, yeah, like to what Mike just did, it was like I go for the exact opposite.
Yeah.
Of what you're actually.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to build drama for the audience, okay? You're not taking my drama seriously.
You lead us into it. I don't want to purposefully guess it and make it sound like I know the answer. The point is you're smarter than us, so it makes it sound so
Still,
much.
I think if you were really asked that, like, and who wants to be a millionaire, you'd probably be like 2 or 3,
Yeah.
like.
Yeah.
It's 0. Like, none have gotten to a. Not one guy has like just had a big game against him. 0.
That's crazy. All right, we'll continue to watch that. Obviously, practice reports will be very important for Josh Downs going through the rest of the week.
Yeah, that's a crazy one. If he doesn't play, and by the way, Jonathan Taylor not practicing yesterday, Anthony Richardson still limited. It could be a different Colts offense than we are accustomed to come Sunday against those Titans.
Big divisional game there.
Yep. All right, something that we will continue to watch. It's a reason to watch fantasy football now on Sunday morning, like we always say. Definitely check in and watch that with us. 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern time on ESPN2. All right, let's get into a handful of start-sit conversations for Week 6, guys, that may be on the fringes that people are asking questions about. And I want to start things off. Our guy, Ladd McConkey. We've been talking about rookie wide receivers. They've been really good in fantasy football so far this year. Ladd McConkey last week. Wide receiver 18 with 17.7 fantasy points. He has been top 20 twice so far this year. But Field, he gets that vaunted Denver Broncos secondary. Do you think that there's a first? I should ask Mike. He's not going to get the shadow from Patrick Surtain.
No, he's in the slot. He'll dodge McConkey. So if Surtain shadows, he'll shadow Quentin Johnston most likely because he's been treated like the number 1 so far. My guess is this is not a shadow game for Surtain.
Okay.
I think they'll be fine with him on Palmer or Quentin Johnston.
So do you think that he could be a potential flex play for us going up against this Broncos secondary?
We use this term more often with running backs, but he is a touchdown-dependent flex play, in my opinion.
Yeah.
He has 24 targets in 4 games this season. That's 6. It also leads the team by like a good amount. All right. He has a nearly 27% target share. Wow. That's like a pretty good number on the surface, right? Not elite, but not bad either. Who has thrown the football less than the Chargers this season on a per game or raw basis? The answer is nobody. I want to do the Mike Clay thing there. He has no more than 67 yards in a game this season. He has no more than 5 catches in a game this season. He has 2 games inside the top 20, and he has 2 games outside of the top 50. If he scores a touchdown, he might pay off. If not, I do think there's a lower ceiling.
This guy, with all
Yeah,
the stats.
right?
Oh, what am I even here for? Just reading off my sheet, basically. That's good stuff. Well done, sir.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well done. Impressive. I don't know if I have anything else to add other than to say the Chargers are kind of, as expected, slow-moving, low volume, extremely run-heavy. So a 26% target share is always a lineup block. Unless you're in an offense like this, where it's just that leads. It's like the Falcons last year.
I was just going to say that. It was Drake London last year. Where
It's kind of like, it's slightly different. But, I mean, same sort of fantasy output. You're right. It's going to lead you to 6 targets at that target share in such a low-volume offense. And, they're in Denver. I don't think we expect this to be a high-scoring, shootout like where they're trailing in this game and have to throw it a lot. And they haven't had to so far. They have a winning record. They've been ahead or competitive. So
good on defense, too. No, they haven't played a tough schedule, but they've allowed the fewest points per game.
This is a classic.
These are the 2 lowest scoring defenses so far. Or 2, is that the right way to describe it? The 2 defenses that have allowed the fewest per game
points.
this
Yeah.
season,
Classic Mike Clay saying, I don't really have a lot to add, and then speaks for another 45 seconds about a bunch of stuff.
I didn't really have numbers, though. It was just talking about the situation.
You're not a numbers guy.
No, I'm not. I don't know.
Not anymore. Not at this point. So ideally not a flex play for us this week if you can help it. It feels like there'd be another wide receiver that you could
I'm at 39, so 12-team leagues, you're probably flexing
Got him as
him.
wide receiver 40.
Yeah, probably on benches and 10-teamers, but it looks like a player, though. I mean, long-term.
Oh, heck yeah, he's a player. It just, this is the perfect storm of things working against him being a more valuable player.
Yep. Speaking of becoming a more valuable player in fantasy football, Mike, I want to talk about Amari Cooper. You alluded to this yesterday.
Oh, yeah, let's talk about this.
Yeah,
I have
give me the numbers here. All right.
I just want to turn everything over to you. Like, what do we need to know about Amari Cooper's season so far this year?
Well, there's a lot of good, but also a lot of bad to go along with it here. So, leads the NFL in air yards, Field's favorite stat.
Love it.
That's a
Love
good
it.
stat.
I like that. 8 or more targets in every game, so that's great.
Wow.
We like that as well. He's third at receiver in targets this season, but he's 49th in yards. First in air yards, 49th in receiving yards, over 10 fantasy points once, and here's why. 43% catch rate and 4.4 yards per target. Both of those are brutal. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. 45% of passes directed to Amari Cooper from Deshaun Watson this season have been charted as off target.
Where's that rank?
That is not just worst in the NFL. That is the worst I have seen, or that we have charted for a receiver going back to, at least my database goes to 2011. That's how deep I go with it. That's the worst.
The worst. Yeah.
Now, it's only been 4 weeks, so the number could come down by the end of the season, but that just shows you how poor the quarterback play has been. And he's had his problems, too. He has drops. I've seen him chart in anywhere from 5 to 8 drops, depending on the outlet you use. So it's not like it's fully the quarterback's fault, but it's definitely a big part of it. So it's just not going well. If you want to feel a little bit better about this week and why it might be a viable flex, Eagles have allowed the 4th most fantasy points to receivers. At least one receiver has 17 or more fantasy points in every game this season. And, of course, if you're picking a Browns receiver to do that, it would be Amari Cooper. So some hope for this week, but that might be the most inefficient battery in the NFL so far. It's been brutal.
Like, close your eyes for a second. And if I just told you this, like, I begin by stating I believe this is a talented football player because he's been doing it for a long time and he's been pretty good.
Yep.
Okay? And then I told you he's 3rd in total targets, tied for 3rd. He is 4th in number of routes run this season.
Yep.
He's top 10 in terms of the percentage of his team's plays he is playing among wide receivers. He's playing all the time, right?
Yeah.
For a team that has not been good and is having to throw the football a lot. You would just say, like, all right, we're good. Mike mentioned the 45% off-target rate. Yeah, his reception percentage, so like the number of targets he's catching, which ties to that off-target rate, is 42.6%.
That's brutal.
So if he gets 10 targets, he's catching a little over 4 of them on average so far this season. That ranks 78th amongst qualifying wide receivers. Bad all the way around. So if you're playing Amari Cooper, I get it. I understand it. He's my wide receiver 33. I have to put him into a couple of different lineups this weekend. I'm doing it, and I'm just hoping that I'm just hoping. That's all I'm doing.
Yes.
I'm kind of closing my eyes
Open
in
prayer.
doing so. Yeah, because I do believe this is a talented football player.
Yeah.
I do believe it's a good matchup. And I don't know, gut check. Maybe I'm hoping that the Browns wake up tomorrow morning and decide to start Jameis Winston.
I don't know.
That'd be
I don't
great
think it's
news.
happening this week, but if that passing game's a joke against this Philly defense, which is struggling, they're going to have to. I mean, you say that, but it doesn't even seem like they're considering it. It's just
I was
wild.
gonna say,
but-
I'm gonna abstain from offering further Deshaun Watson thoughts. I cleared the air earlier this week about how I feel about this.
I'll say this: if you have Cooper on your team, you're probably hoping they lose and trade him, right?
Yes.
Oh, no doubt. I 100% want the change of scenery, which
It seems kind of likely.
I would say it's likely because A, they are 1-4, and B, I don't want to bore people with all the cap minutia, but the Browns restructured his contract this offseason to beef up the incentives available. Safe to say he's not tracking to hit those. Yes. However, they turned much of his base salary into a bonus, which means that an acquiring team would owe Amari Cooper just $1.21 million for the full season. And obviously we're a third of the way through, so it's going to be 2/3 of that number. Just to compare that to Devontae Adams, who's a better player, to be clear. His base salary is $17 million. So however many weeks do you have left? That number is, if there's 12 weeks left, you owe Devontae $12 more million. If there's 12 weeks left, you owe Amari Cooper $800,000. It's a pretty tradable contract.
Yeah, that's not bad at
I'm
all.
curious to see if they adjust the scheme because Kevin Stefanski, generally a run-first play caller, but since Ken Dorsey's come over there this year, they've been extremely pass-heavy. I think they're still the pass-heaviest.
Stefanski calling the plays?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I wonder if that changes too. Like,
Yeah, but I don't know why they flipped the switch. The only notable change is the coordinator.
okay, yeah. But I'm saying like how they might flip the switch because it's like a way to like just deflect from like, hey, we'll switch the play caller because that'll make the quarterback better, right?
Well, I don't know about the play caller.
Right.
Just, are they going to start balancing it out? And now
I hear
the
ya.
other part of that is
Hear
Nick
ya.
Chubb's probably going to return soon. I mean, they said they didn't say no that he wasn't coming back this week. So I'd still be surprised if he played this week, but he's obviously getting close. Maybe when he comes back, they start to run the ball more, balance it out. Maybe that helps the offense a little bit, but they gotta do something to take some pressure off the defense because this is one of the best defenses on paper in the NFL, and they can't win games because the offense has been horrific.
Yeah, it really has been bad. All right, Mike, I appreciate all of this Amari Cooper conversation. I know you wanted to talk about it yesterday, but it just seems so astronomically bad to have a guy get this many targets and be able to turn it into so little production. And it's not a guy that's just getting deep shots over and over, like you guys have said. Like, he is a legitimate wide receiver in the NFL. This is Amari freaking Cooper. Yeah. So hopefully better days are ahead. Ideally, like you guys mentioned, hopefully there is a trade that takes place that kind of can boost his value for us.
Well, anyway, thanks for indulging me on
Yeah,
my
of course.
interesting stat that I came across.
Yeah.
Dude, the idea that his off-target percentage is that high.
Worst.
Like,
The worst that Mike has
Almost half
tracked
of
in
his
almost
targets aren't even
15
catchable.
years.
that's unreal. That really is unreal. All right, let's talk about a couple of running backs. So he's a start this week. But that doesn't mean you have to feel good about
I'm at 32. It helps that they're playing the Eagles. If
Yeah.
they weren't playing the Eagles, that would probably make it tougher. But again, they're underdogs. I believe it's in Philly, right? So they're gonna. You would imagine they're certainly underdogs. They're probably gonna have to keep throwing the ball. It's gonna help Cooper.
Yeah.
I'm an idiot for doing this,
Uh-oh.
but I'm going to do it again because I can't help myself. Sometimes you find yourself in, like, if it doesn't happen this week situation, just won't happen, period. It should happen, right? It's supposed to happen on a week like this, like Amari Cooper getting a ton of targets against a bad Eagles secondary. It should be good.
Yep.
I feel like as someone who religiously watches the Eagles, I'm like he's gonna have a good game. Like, it's just
I'm sorry.
it's every week. The number one receiver.
It should happen.
Philly it always does.
If it doesn't happen this weekend, though, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to tell you anymore.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. All right, let's talk about Zack Moss and Chase Brown because this was Zack Moss's job to start the season. And over the last 2 weeks, guys, that has sort of changed here. Chase Brown, more touches than Zack Moss over the last 2 weeks, more total yards from scrimmage, more touchdowns. It really feels like this has become not just like a work split, but a work split in which Chase Brown is actually the more efficient running back in this offense field.
He's definitely playing more. He has definitely been more efficient of late. I don't think that Zack Moss, though, has faded away that much.
No,
he's
he's
still my RB26. I've got Chase Brown at RB29. I think that perhaps my interpretation of this is more Chase Brown stock up, less of Zack Moss stock down. Just look at Zack Moss's total number of snaps per game this season. 31, 50, 46, 36, 44. I wonder if part of the reason why
That's Brown's snaps, right?
that's Zack Moss's snaps. This is Chase Brown's 16, 11, 14, 26, 21.
It sounded too low for Moss.
Zack Moss.
That adds up to
31,
like 70%
50.
per game, right?
No, they haven't played that many snaps in those first few games. Remember that game against the Patriots? They barely had the football. It was wild.
Who's on the field then? I don't know. Anyway,
No, they've been playing basically. It's been like
It's been Moss. I mean, Moss has dominated the snaps even the last 2 weeks. He's held a pretty big edge. It's just they're giving the ball to
58,
Brown. when he's on the
68. Yeah, no, it's 58 to 42%.
Oh, there you go.
68 to 32%.
Maybe I misheard you. I
Yeah,
thought,
no,
I
I'm
thought
saying
you were
total
saying like
number of
48.
snaps.
Okay.
Total number of snaps. So what I'm saying is that, like, I think
I gotcha. Okay. All right.
the
ignore
total
me.
number of snaps, not the snap percentage.
I gotcha
Every
now.
whatever the
Maybe I should
total
pay
number of
attention.
whatever the total number of snaps is, their two percentages are going to add up to 100 because
Yes.
they're the only two backs that play.
That's where I got confused.
So I think that part of Chase Brown has definitely played better of late.
Yep.
I also wonder if part of this is like they've just been playing more offensive snaps recently.
Mm-hmm.
So Chase Brown did play early in this last week's game. So part of this was definitely by design, but they just played a low number of snaps early in the season that the numbers for Zack Moss seem a little bit more. The past couple seem a little worse right now compared to where I think they actually are. He's still playing a lot. He still has the clear edge and snaps. He's still running a route on, let's see, the past couple of weeks. Past 3 weeks, 59% of the routes, 59% of the team's route percentage, 44, 49. So he's still playing like about what he was before. So I think it's more Chase Brown is rising. Zack Moss is kind of where he has been.
Yeah.
Neither one of them is a lineup lock, and I, of course, think there's a possibility that Brown eats in a little bit more to Moss's work as the season goes on.
Yeah, you kind of nailed it on the head. I mean, I think Moss is down a little bit because the snaps haven't changed a lot. It's still 80 to 47 in favor of Moss the last couple of weeks. So to your point, he's still on the field substantially more. But when Brown's on the field, they're putting the ball in his hands, which they did not do earlier this season. He does have 16-plus fantasy points each of the last 2 weeks since he's been getting the ball more, but he's only played 37% of the snaps during that span. So I think it's that. And also, to your point, by the way, I think that's a stat I use a lot the first like 2 to 3 weeks of the season and then don't use as much, which is those like kind of underlying stats that you don't really see, which is total snaps played. That can be a tricky stat the first couple of weeks if a team just so happens to play 70 and 72 snaps and another team plays, 45 and 48. You're like, well, actually, it looks bad for this player, but he's been on the field. The target share is high, so when they start running 64 plays, the NFL average, he's going to come around. So that's something I talked about the first couple of weeks of the season, and that's always interesting. Now, by now, it starts to level out a little bit, but that's obviously an excellent point. So I'm with you. I think Moss down a little bit. We thought he might be an RB2, now more of just a flex option, and Brown's just like a worse flex. He's just a lesser flex right now than Zack Moss.
What would it take for Chase Brown to have to leapfrog Zack Moss? Even if he gets more fantasy points again for the third game in a row.
Our rankings, you mean?
Yeah, will it not make a difference because he's not seeing the field as much as Zack Moss? And Mike, you guys would rather have like a guy out there on the field.
Yeah.
Mike.
He's have to pass him. I mean, he's clearly a guy playing. I mean, Chase Brown even the last 2 weeks is playing as much as Braylon Allen. He just happened to score 3 touchdowns in 2 games. But Zack Moss is still getting goal line work. It's not like that.
No.
It's a little fluky. Moss got all the touchdowns the first few weeks.
Yep.
Brown wasn't playing that much. Now Brown's playing more. He stole a couple touchdowns. Next week, Moss might score and Brown doesn't. And then you're like, oh, man, why did I start this guy? He's playing a third of the snaps. He got 12 touches, didn't score. Dumb, so he's just not there yet. He's not in a position for consistent fantasy output just yet.
So, in case you were wondering, just as we're talking about these running backs, where we have them ranked, Zack Moss, like you had just said, potentially low-end RB2, high-end flex play. Chase Brown, a little lower of a flex play in this one. Running backs on bye this week. Obviously, you have the Chiefs running backs with Kareem Hunt, I guess is who you would probably have.
Hunt, yeah.
That was
What a
starting.
superstar. What do you have? How many carries did he have last week?
27, something like that. Yeah. You also have Aaron Jones and Ty Chandler. From the Vikings, the Dolphins, you have Devon A. Chan, and then in the Rams game, you have Kyron Williams. So a handful of guys that would have been in front of him for that.
Chan will be an interesting topic next week.
He will definitely.
Sure will be, man. He sure will be. Before we get to our next player, which will be Calvin Ridley, the Jets have now announced that they have a new play caller. Todd Downing will take over.
Oh, interesting.
Wow.
A lot of changes this week.
A lot of changes here. I think that like any kind of fantasy football analysis about what a play caller means, when it's not a play caller who has like a very specific style, like I wouldn't say that like Todd Downing's prior tenures as an offensive play caller suggests to me that like this offense is ready to take off. I would say that because I'm a glass half full guy in life, I'm hopeful that just changing things up means a better, more efficient offense.
Yeah, and here's what you want: more Brees Hall, less Allen Lazard. That's the recipe to success. Get it in the hands of your good players, not the guy leading the league in drops. So you win games.
Honestly, it doesn't feel like it can get much worse for the Jets offense, so hopefully we see some
Keep
some
peppering
boost.
Garrett Wilson.
Yep,
Happy with that.
just
I
nonstop.
wonder when the other shoe is going to drop on the Adams trade too.
Dude, I assumed by Thursday we would have had some sort of
thought it would have been done.
musings. Yeah.
I thought so too. And Antonio Pierce yesterday sure made it seem like the team is like happy with Devontae continuing to rehab in Las Vegas. I just know that if my team was eventually going to be trading this player, like it was a matter of when, not if.
Yeah.
Even though I don't sympathize ever over billionaires having to spend money, like I don't think I'd want to give away $1 million a week.
I agree. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Just for fun. Just for the kicks of it.
I'll take $1 million.
Yeah.
Just for the record.
For what it's worth. Yeah, if any billionaires out there listening to our podcast. All right, let's talk about Calvin Ridley. Wide receiver 53 in fantasy points per game. He only has 19 targets on the season, guys. 9 receptions on the season. 9.
How much is he making per year?
A lot more
$23
than
million.
any of us for what it's worth.
Definitely
This is
how
a
you should spend your
situation
money, huh?
where it feels like if he can't get it done this week against the Colts, who feel like they can be had, their secondary definitely has allowed a lot of fantasy points to the wide receiver position, then we're in. I'm already panicked about my Calvin Ridley shares, but like it has to happen this week.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking a little bit. We remember this from last year in Jacksonville. He was kind of all over the map. His product. Remember, he had the huge week 1, and then he disappeared for like 3 straight weeks. And he had a huge game, and then late in the year he had like a string of big games. He was all over the place. So hopefully there's an element of that because we've seen the upside, right? He had an 87 yards and 2 touchdown game against a good Jets defense. The last 2 games, though, he was shadowed by Jair Alexander and Jalen Ramsey in those games. And again, you would expect better than what he put out there. 2 catches for 14 yards total in those games, but at least there's some justification other than it's just not going well.
Yeah.
So I'm leaning onto that. He's still on the field. He's still their number 1. DeAndre Hopkins, his target started to go up before the bye week, but he's still a part-time player, so I don't know how much I trust him yet.
This whole offense just feels so tough when your quarterback has thrown more touchdowns to the opposing team's defense than your wide receiver 1 on the team.
Yeah, that's the problem is that so Mike mentioned some of the numbers there. He's got back-to-back games with 3 targets, exactly 3 targets. You mentioned 9 catches for the entire season. He has 1 in 4 games, top 50 finish. 1 time he's been in the top 50.
And it was that Jets game. It was a huge
which
game.
of course, go figure, right? So
Like Amari Cooper. It's like the same thing.
yeah, but you know something? I thought about this a bit more. Like Amari Cooper, obviously, he's getting a ton of work.
Yeah, he's
right?
getting the targets, just not the
Not
production, the fantasy
production.
point totals.
You drew the parallel to last year and how he was a bit up and down with Jacksonville. I think the fundamental difference for me here is I don't trust the offense or the quarterback.
Yeah.
Whether it's Mason Rudolph or Will Levis, it sounds like it's going to be Will Levis if he's healthy enough to play this weekend. I just don't trust them.
Yep.
So Ridley, very talented player. I don't think this is a Calvin Ridley issue. There's a reason why they paid him $23 million per year. Now they just need to start utilizing him like
Gosh,
that.
that's a lot.
So he's wide receiver 42 for me this week. But if you were to ask me, like, my confidence level that Calvin Ridley catapults to becoming like a weekly top 25 wide receiver on a 1 to 10 scale, I give it like a 3.5.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm higher. I'm at 33, but that's primarily due to the matchup. I mean, the Jets have allowed the highest yards per target to wide receiver. Or excuse me, the Colts have allowed the highest yards per target to receivers this season. 6 most yards as well. You know, they really struggle against the perimeter. And Kenny Moore, is in the slot. Usually he's actually been out the last couple of weeks as well. So they just are having problems in the secondary, and it shapes up well here for Ridley. So in theory, this should be one of those games. Much like with Cooper against Philly, this should be a good game for Amari Cooper.
Yeah.
Or for Amari Cooper and Calvin Ridley, all these guys.
This is like I don't want to say a desperation flex, but I feel like with where we're at, there's likely someone on your roster that has performed better through this point of the season that you would rather start over Calvin Ridley. But the matchup, Mike, like you mentioned, if you're taking a shot, this should hopefully be a week that Calvin Ridley gets back on track. I would have him as a sit if I could help it, but I understand if you need to start
I would
him.
too.
Yeah, I'm a little more optimistic. I'm at 33, so that's right.
I mean, I also
Close option, yeah.
it just doesn't feel good. Just you know what? He's one of those guys where like you put him in and you don't need to watch the game. Don't watch the game.
That's my. I mean, Mike doesn't watch the games in general,
In
but
the
I
first
don't
place.
plan to watch.
He's watching Colts Titans.
It's not.
Like if you're
Joe Flacco stands like me.
Well, if he plays, but then we want to watch Richardson. I guess that's the most appealing thing. I guess to be watching Richardson or Flacco.
Flacco.
But if you're watching, if you have YouTube TV on and you could pick your games, right? Or you still can't pick like all the games, but there's certain things you could do. You're probably not picking the one that has the Titans Colts. You probably have better ones plus Red Zone, right?
Yes.
In any event,
for what it's worth, I don't put on Red Zone when I have the 4 box. Like I would rather have the 4 games, and then like they just.
Oh, do you really?
Yeah, I don't.
I do Red Zone and one with the sound, and then I have the other games so I could keep it on.
So you can kind of see. Interesting.
dulcet tones of Scott Hansen.
Yeah, he's fantastic for what it's worth.
Great guy. Yep.
Let's talk about Cortland Sutton. Cortland Sutton
Oil and
taking
water.
on the Chargers. Is there a chance that Cortland Sutton is kind of like Amari Cooper light, where it's like he's wide receiver 11 in targets, but wide receiver 56 in fantasy points per game? Like he's getting some volume in this offense, but it's just not converting.
I'm going to use a
What are we
mic.
doing? We could have made this pod like half as long and been like, just here's the list of receivers. They're all the same.
Yes.
Here's the analysis. Same analysis for all of them.
I want to use the Mike Clayism here for a second. Check this out. Okay?
Ooh.
You mentioned
check
11th,
this out.
11th in total targets.
Yep.
25th in total routes run. That's pretty good, right?
Pretty good.
He's tied for 6th with the most end zone targets.
Stealing all my stats.
Yeah.
Ready for this,
We're gonna
though?
shut this down.
You mentioned this. How about this, though? All right, so this is a vertical threat, right? That's what Cortland Sutton is. I want to give you guys a little bit of context on how he is playing or who he is playing with right now. Bo Nix on throws, 10-plus yards down the field this season.
Yep.
In terms of air yards, not plays that result in 10-plus
Say air yards?
He did say
10-plus air yards down the field. Guess Bo Nix's completion percentage.
On deep throws, 32%.
69%.
There's 45 throws. He has completed 11 of those. That's a 24.4%.
Dang, that's
Just for some context, I was trying to think about a quarterback who's been middle of the pack-ish this season. I think this guy's a very, very good quarterback, but I would just say, like, based off of how it started versus how it's gone recently, I was like, Kirk Cousins has been, like,
Yeah, slow start, better lately.
more middle of the pack-ish.
Yep.
So 24.4% for Bo Nix. Kirk Cousins up near 53%. Just to give you some context. I'm sure there's somebody who's like a surgeon down the field, and I'm sure there are some guys who are in Bo Nix territory, but he isn't fit with his offense.
Yeah.
I just don't think he is. Like, I don't think Cortland Sutton, a guy who's at his best, streaking down the field, testing a defense vertically, is a great fit with an offense that right now wants to be as horizontally, get the football out fast, run the football, and play great defense as you can be. I don't think he is. So I've got him as wide receiver 32 this week.
I think he's just going to be boom bust like he's been. I mean, very touchdown dependent last season. The volume wasn't good overall, but he scored 10 touchdowns. And
But how much boom has there been so far this year?
not a lot of boom.
There's not a lot of boom, right?
no, I mean,
his best finish
No,
is wide
he's
receiver
hit
29.
13 points twice. He has, he's getting the end zone targets. He has 9 or more targets in 3 of his 5 games. So they're trying to get him the football because he's clearly their number one. He's actually has a career high target share this season, a little over 26.
This is why numbers do lie to you. That's why.
I mean, the problem is, like you said, not a great connection with the rookie quarterback so far. But also this week they're playing the Chargers, and the Chargers haven't been that efficient against wide receivers. They've allowed the second highest yards per target this season, but They just haven't they faced the fewest targets on a per game
No one throws the ball in those games. They play
exactly
Big Ten
right.
football.
Yeah, so they've allowed the third fewest fantasy
It's a
points.
good call. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like
Because the Chargers want to run the ball as much as they possibly can, utilize a bunch of the clock, and honestly,
Slow. They move slow. They're
Broncos
just
going to do the same thing, it feels like.
they want to eat. They want to play a game to 17 every week.
That's right. And that's what we expect from this game, right? This is probably going to be a 17-13 game, something like that.
Yeah, I think I have Cortland Sutton as a sit if I can help it in this
I'm
one.
at 33 or 31. I'm at 31.
32 for me.
I mean, 32. It's a 32. If you have him at 32, you don't feel good about it. It's just because he's the wide receiver one in this offense and because he is getting that target volume. But
You would think a number one like him, a guy with his resume, should be a lineup lock, and he's not because of the situation and this matchup. So he's still a flex, maybe a wide receiver 3 and a 12-teamer, but not a lineup lock.
Field mentioned it. I'm just going to reiterate it because you guys were kind of talking at the same time. But only 1 week inside the top 30 at the position so far this year for Cortland Sutton, which is just tough. So we'll see how that one works. All right, let's talk about a couple of players potentially on the rise, guys.
Do it.
Rico Dowdle has clearly taken.
You just put him here because you got him off waivers after I cut him.
So you say that. No, that's not true. And I didn't put him here. I think people think sometimes they're like, oh, Dopp definitely came up with this segment. I don't produce this show, guys. I don't produce the show anymore. So when you say stuff like that, it makes people think
emeritus.
that I am doing this.
Producer emeritus. Isn't that what you call someone who used to hold a role? You're producer emeritus.
I believe that's what it is. Yeah, yeah.
Hear
But
that.
no, like Rico Dowdle is a guy that has been absolutely fantastic, all things considered, for what he started the season as. He's clearly taken this lead back. Ezekiel Elliott basically doesn't even exist. He's going to be a ghost for Halloween with the way that he's started.
Zeke with 17 or fewer rushing yards in 4 of his 5 games this season.
He's still on the roster. I don't know what you're doing.
Yeah,
their
Zeke's
fullback-
snap percentage. Yeah, go ahead, Daniel.
Their fullback Hunter Lepke is getting more run in this offense than Ezekiel Elliott is. So it is clearly Rico Dowdle.
Yeah, it is.
But it doesn't feel great. This week going up against the Lions, who outside of last week, or 2 weeks ago, I guess they just had a bye week, when they gave up a bunch of fantasy points to Ken Walker, they have been really, really good. I would expect the same kind of thing this week, where the Cowboys are going to beat the Lions through the air, not as much on the ground game. But that doesn't mean that Rico Dowdle hasn't been on the rise as a running back.
It's the same category to me as what we were talking about with like Zack Moss earlier, right? Like not this overwhelmingly talented player, not a super explosive offense that he is playing in on the ground, but the volume is really good. He's seen his rush attempts go up each of the past 4 weeks from 7 to 8 to 11 to 20. Zeke is in turn going down, 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 down. So yeah, Rico Dowdle has taken hold of this backfield. For whatever that's worth, I think it's worth about a flex play. And if you told me at the trade deadline the Cowboys found a running back available and upgraded, I would not be surprised.
Yeah. I'm going to use this mechanism. So I waived Rico Dowdle last week or Sunday morning to pick up Justin Tucker.
Yep.
So, of course, he had
Oh,
career
there you
highs
go.
in carries with 20 and touches with 22 and yards with 114 and fantasy points with 19.4. Also played a career high share of the snaps. But you know what that share was? Career high share of the snaps.
I'm going to
51%.
guess.
Well, yeah, I know.
51%. One game over 13 touches this season. So not getting too carried away on Rico Dowdle.
He's the best they've got. He's
He's the best they got for now. We'll see. I wonder if at some point they give Dalvin Cook a shot. I mean, you don't bring him in to just chill on the practice squad.
Did you watch him last year?
I did watch him last season, but he was in the best shape,
Shape of his life. That's right.
Oh,
I saw a shirtless photo, guys, so I changed my opinion drastically. No, but I think there's options out there. I wonder if like when Jonathan Brooks comes back, if like Miles Sanders gets cut loose or traded or something. Like there's options out there. Maybe they add someone, but for now it's Dowdle.
I think if Dallas really gets things going, because offensively it still feels like they're trying to find their groove, to be honest. They haven't been like the high-flying Dallas Cowboys that we've seen in the past. It has been a tough schedule. But that's one of the reasons why I do like Rico a little bit more. Ideally, this is a team that's going to score some more fantasy points. Not this week, though. I have him as running back 28. What about Darnell Mooney?
it's a quick one, I think, right?
He has been absolutely fantastic with Kirk Cousins. That wide receiver 2 spot, I mean, he's clearly the second pass catcher there above Kyle Pitts and anyone else in that passing game.
I think you, over the last 4 games, 37 targets. You like that number, right? He's a full-time player in the sending passing offense in a great matchup.
Yeah, he's awesome, and he has 5 fewer targets than Drake London for the team lead. It's
crazy.
He's, hefty, and by the way, outstanding matchup. If you just look at surface numbers, Panthers mid-pack in fantasy points to receivers, but they've allowed the most to the perimeter over the last 4 weeks. So that's where Mooney aligns and Drake London aligns. They should be set up for another huge game here.
Yeah, running basically 100% of the routes for them, has a target share of at least
He's a full-time,
24% in
100%
3 of 5 games. Yeah, this is and this might be sticky too. Like he's a legit football player too, right? Like this is a $13 million per year wide receiver who was a second-year player with the Bears, had over 1,000 yards.
These guys always work out. It's that guy where we're like, you know what? he's a boring, like, 10th round pick in fantasy drafts. Like, Jacoby Myers last year was my favorite target like that. And it's just like, the numbers just say he's going to have a big season. He's in such a good spot in this offense. We know what target share or what he can do because we've seen it in Chicago, but it just feels so boring. Like, at that point, you want to take the rookies. You want to take McConkey and Odunze and Worthy and all those guys, but it's like, here's Mooney just sitting there, this boring guy, and he's paying off, just like Myers did last year. It's another just home run, boring veteran pick in the middle rounds.
Does it feel like, I mean, if he's going to continue to be this guy, and we talk about this, right, with some of these other offenses in the NFL, if Drake London is going to be a thing for us this year, and he has been so far with Kirk Cousins, and Darnell Mooney is going to be a thing this year, and we eventually expect Bijan Robinson to be able to be more than what he has been in this backfield, in part because he's getting a lot of work out of the passing game still. Like, can they sustain 4 guys, including Kyle Pitts, in this offense, or does one of them have to fall off?
No, I think they can. And the reason is because they are playing like every snap this year. Like, they're not necessarily using like a 4th receiver. Like, Kadarius Hodge only caught that touchdown because London was off the field because he was a little beat up in that game where they, speaking of running a lot of snaps.
Playing a ton of plays.
Exactly right. So, and also the other reason Pitts can survive is tight end.
The position itself is just bad.
I mean,
But I do think it won't be every week. Like,
I agree.
Yeah.
That was my
going to
next
be
point.
that, like, yeah, all 4 over the course of the season, the numbers will bear out like solid fantasy players. It's just going to be that, like, oh, Kyle Pitts has another 2-catch week. That's weird.
Yeah, he might be like tight end 9. I'm not saying like it's going to lead to tight end 3 or something, but it's enough to be a starting caliber tight end, I think.
Going out on a limb, I still value, like, as weekly starters, without a question, Bijan and Drake London.
Yeah.
Well, I know I'm going out on a limb.
Big limb there. All right, let's talk about, a rookie running back that has crushed it last little bit. Tank Bigsby. Running back 1 last week, guys. 25.9 fantasy points. Obviously, Travis Etienne got banged up dealing with that shoulder injury, so that's one of the main things that we're going to keep our eye on is where he is at. But as Tank kind of got himself into this Bucky Irving role where he has carved out touches in this offense. I think
it's like a little shy of that, but I'm more optimistic than Mike is. Like, I've got him as running back 36 this week, but for me, it's probably a little bit less about what the value is for this week in Tank Bigsby. He has seen his snaps, carries, and his routes run all increase over each of the past 3 games. Now, he is never going to be confused for Travis Etienne as a pass catcher.
Yeah.
But he ran out 8 routes last week. That's not a lot, but it's an improvement, right? So, like, a couple of the key metrics are going up by the week. I don't know how much of that is tied to the fact that Etienne has been banged up or because the team just feels like Bigsby is playing too well. And, oh, by the way, I know this is not going to last. He's averaging 8 yards a carry.
Yeah.
That's the most of any player with at least 30 carries so far this season. He's playing well, I think enough so that, like, I value at this point of the year, especially with now, by the time this weekend is over, we will have had a quarter of the league's buys behind us. I start to like to pick up and stash these backup running backs who, if thrust into a starting role, would be super valuable.
Yeah, you said it. He's a bench stash. That's it. He is, but I think people are wondering, like, can I start this guy because he's had 90-plus yards in back-to-back games, and you just mentioned the huge game last week, and I think the answer to that is pretty clearly no. If Travis Etienne's on the field, he's played 22% of the snaps, and that might be going up a little bit. And again, last week it was partially because Etienne was hurt. Before Etienne was off the field last week, it was 6-6 in carries, so he was at best splitting a low volume of carries, and he has 1 target this season. 1 target. That's not enough. You need probably 2-3 a game to be a guy that you're considering for your flex spot unless you're getting almost all of the carries. So Bigsby is not close to a starting option. Chicago hasn't been great on the ground. 5 yards per carry they're allowing to running backs. They've allowed 17-plus points to the lead back in 4 or 5 games. That benefits Etienne if he's on the field, not as much Bigsby. So I think your analysis is correct. He should be on benches, but not in starting lineups yet.
One thing I'm not trying to, like, tell you how to say things, but I know I'm trying to, like, use this phrase less and less personally as, like, can I start this guy? Like, yeah, you can start whoever you want, right? Like, things can happen, right? Back-to-back weeks, I would have told you should not be starting Tank Bigsby, and he had over 90 rushing yards, right? Like, it's almost like what I'm trying to tell you when you have him outside the top 30 for running backs is, like, this is not the profile of a player who typically pays off. It's football. It's random. He's a good runner. He's going to get some goal line work potentially. Yes, he could pay off for you, but there are some reasons to be cautious about buying too much into what the results have been over the past 2 games.
So we posted a poll asking our audience, has Tank Bigsby done enough to be the RB1 in Jacksonville? And that poll came back with 53% of our viewers saying yes, he has done.
CC Doug Peterson, you hear that? Here's your chance.
I disagree. I'm an ETN apologist.
I know you are.
He's too good. He's still 25. He's fine. He's been a little beat up, but we do this all the time with these guys. They come in and they play a handful of snaps and are explosive because they're fresh, and then it's like, oh, man, the starter stinks. Get him out of there. And the coaches are like, we know who our better player is, usually. And that's why, once those guys take on a larger role, the efficiency plummets and they're not as good, and then they get a little beat up, and
What
things
if,
change quickly.
and I'm not suggesting this is going to happen, but like, what if Travis Etienne were to miss this game? Would Tank
then
Bigsby go into a top 25, top 20
I
running
think
back?
he'd be around there. Dearness Johnson will play a lot, too, probably in passing situations. So, you don't want to get too carried away. These guys don't just go in all the time and get 25 touches. You need to have that profile.
It seemed like the Giants were trying to not do that with Tyrone Tracy last week. And then Eric Gray fumbled in the goal line. Yeah,
that's right.
He did not fumble, people. He actually scored a touchdown.
I agree with
and
that.
then all of a sudden, the cord gets pulled.
Yeah.
So just to illustrate what the point that Mike is making, like, it worked out last week for Tracy, but it didn't seem like it was heading that way after the first drive.
No, they were splitting carries early on, and then that was it, right over to Tracy. And he was probably the much better player, but
Yeah. But 3 catches for 50 yards for Eric Gray. He was.
But he's had major fumble issues in his career,
Yes, yep.
so it's been a
Let's talk about the more exciting one, though, of the Jaguars offense.
Ryan Thomas Jr.
I think this might be I hate this term and I love this term at the same time. This might be a potential league winner. Over the past 3 weeks.
I've been so many teams.
Yeah.
Makes me so happy.
He is soaring. Over the past 3 weeks, he has 8, 8, and 9 targets. He had 8 total targets with exactly 4 each in weeks 1 and 2. And this is what I like about it, though, is that so he is top 20 in the average depth of his targets. The further from the football that you throw the ball, or the further from the line of scrimmage you throw it, the less likely it is to be caught, right? It stands to reason.
Yeah, but more likely to get big yardage. Yeah.
Yep. And yet he's still catching 65% of his targets this year. So he's efficient. Maybe that's because Trevor Lawrence is a good deep thrower. The numbers are kind of average right now for Trevor Lawrence, but I think the strength of his game in the past has been his deep ball accuracy. I like this one a lot, though. I'm a big fan. I don't know if anything changes dramatically with Evan Ingram back in the fold soon, but oh boy, the sky is the limit here.
Yeah, I think he's established as their number 1 receiver right now, especially because Christian Kirk, for some reason, we were like, he's back now. He always starts slow, and then they're like, oh, yeah, he's good, and he play. And then last week, he was not even on the field. He was like running as the clear 3 well behind Gabe Davis and Brian Thomas. But Brian Thomas has also given us a high floor. He's been a top 30 scorer in 4 of 5 games. So if you're looking for somebody like, is this guy a lineup block, a wide receiver 3, a flex? The answer is absolutely yes. He should be locked in.
However, just want to put this out there. Tough matchup on Sunday against the Bears.
Yes, the Bears.
Really good. Yeah.
Nico Collins had a huge game against them. No other receivers reached 13 fantasy points against the Bears this season.
Do you think I'm just going to say this. You can tell me if you disagree. I think that Brian Thomas Jr. is going to score more than 13 fantasy points against the Bears.
You think so? Yeah. I mean, I would. Let's see. 13.5 is the projection.
Dang it. I was trying to get a board bet in there, guys, but
All right, close.
all right.
I'm not betting against him. It's one of them things. Like if I had a negative board bet on him, but I have him on a bunch of teams, then I'm in this weird spot.
You're like hedging,
yeah,
sort
but
of.
also-
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Back-to-back weeks inside the top 10. That 85-yard touchdown reception last week was just beautiful, the way he got behind the secondary there. All right, let's talk one more really quickly. Trey Sermon, I just want to mention this. Jonathan Taylor still not back at practice. So we're going to, right now, I'm operating under the idea if I have Jonathan Taylor that I need to make other plans, and if I find out positive news on Sunday morning, great. Then I'll have Jonathan Taylor. But right now, Trey Sermon kind of feels like he's going to be back in as the running back 1 of this offense this week.
I think he's a desperation play this week.
Yeah, I mean,
Volume is his friend. That's about it.
yeah, third lowest yards per carry allowed by the Titans so far this season. They haven't been as dominant against that position as they've been in years past, but they're still allowing 3.4 yards per carry, which is really good. And keep in mind, again, we keep saying this, like just because Taylor goes out doesn't mean one guy is going to take on the full workload. Last week, Sermon, 40 snaps, 10 carries, 6 targets. They were all number 1 among running backs. But Tyler Goodson ran 20 routes and played 29 snaps and had 5 carries and 3 targets. He was the preferred option in passing situations. So it's a two-headed committee if, of course, Taylor remains out.
By the
He's
way,
got to get in the end zone, basically, to pay off for us.
yeah, he had 16 opportunities last week, 10 carries and 6 targets. I think he survived off of volume last week. 3.8 yards per carry for him last week. Nothing about the eye test screams to me that he should be in lineups for sure, other than if Jonathan Taylor is out. However, it's worth noting that Sermon himself is banged up. He did not practice on Wednesday.
Okay. All right, that's going to do it for players on the rise. Let's talk about our Thursday night football preview. This seems like it's going to be a really fun matchup, guys. A couple of
I feel
NFC
like
West
these guys,
teams.
you're right. They always play good games. Like,
I
this
do.
is a great Thursday night.
I think about like Russ versus Kaepernick era of this rivalry. Like that was probably the peak.
back.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
when you look at this team, let's start with the 49ers. Brock Purdy has been pretty good so far this year. Not so much in fantasy, but number 1 in yards per attempt. Number 2 in air yards per attempt. Number 4 in passing yards. But he's still only one finish inside the top 14 at the position.
All checks out.
It's just right, like, why is that? Like, but what's been going on with the idea that he's been able to be so up there in yards
and running? He doesn't run. Yeah.
Last year he had over 30 touchdowns. Yeah, right. So
this year he just hasn't gotten anything.
But he had but he was like
right?
number 1 in QBR, yards per target, all those stats last year. Had a ton of passing touchdowns, and he was still only like QB 8 or something because he does not do anything with his legs. It's just
he can. He just does not do it free. They don't need him.
Well, that's what I mean.
Why would they bother? When
That's
they
going to
have
crush you in fantasy.
Literally every great skill.
So he is a slightly more athletic version of like the Jared Goff, Kirk Cousins, like Matthew Stafford in his prime
more like
type.
Jordan Love type.
Jordan Love.
Well, he runs a lot. I guess.
Love doesn't run anymore.
I mean, he had 250 rushing yards or something last year. I mean,
This year he's not running anymore.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. He's been beat up, right? So
He had
that might
0
change.
rushing yards in the first healthy game.
That might
Zero
change.
attempts.
That might change if he gets
They're in Brazil.
healthier.
Things are weird in Brazil.
Speed limit issues.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it is. So probably not starting him. But what about these pass catchers? We got Debo, we got Brandon Ayuk, we got George Kittle, a lot of guys that we can consider. Jordan Mason obviously locked in as a starter this week at the running back spot.
Those 4 we feel pretty like profile as starters, right? They're all prone to up or down because it's the 49ers. We talked about this
effect.
famously last year, but Mason, even with his lack of passing game involvement, you're going to play him. Debo, Ayuk coming off of a big game. Hopefully he's trending up. Kittle as well. He's been great this season.
Mm-hmm.
The trickier one, I guess. I don't know. Let's talk about Juwan Jennings for a second. We've had some fun with this guy so far this season. Mike, I know, talked about this previously.
Won a board bet last week.
You did. The games with both Debo and Ayuk this season, which has been 4 out of 5 weeks.
Yep.
Juwan Jennings has played 47 and then exactly 57, 57, and 57% of the snaps with those two guys both on the field. He has been wide receiver 34, 57, 38, and 84.
Yep. Yep.
Those two guys play, he is a deeper league consideration only.
Yeah, no doubt. Hasn't reached 12 fantasy points in any of those games with those 4 on the field. And I'll just update the stat I said last week. 6 or fewer targets in 37 of his last 40 games going back to the start of 2022.
Wow.
He gets these opportunities once in a while when someone's hurt. And sometimes he does well in those games, like a couple weeks ago. Sometimes he doesn't. But the fact is he usually isn't close to the fantasy radar when everyone else is healthy.
If you're playing him, he's a good player. Right? He's a talented player. We believe that.
Yep.
Decent yards per catch. Not crazy, but decent yards per catch. Good red zone weapon and a good offense. Those are like why him as the number 3 receiver is different than the number 3 receiver in other offenses, but still, in an ideal world, a 10-team league, he
is droppable. I mean, I know he's like, what is he in 17th in fantasy points? Like, you don't have to keep him on your roster because
10-team league.
I mean, if you want to leave him on the end of your bench in case Debo or Ayuk gets hurt, fine, but he's not a guy you have to keep roster.
It's a pretty chalky offense, to be honest, for fantasy football because it's, Jordan Mason, you're starting probably the 2 wide receivers in spite of some of the struggles they've had.
And I like those offenses.
And George Kittle, it feels really great.
Just a few of them.
A little less so.
One thing I want to mention really quickly on the 49ers, just in case, Stefania brought it up earlier, in case you did not make this change during your waiver period, Jake Moody, their kicker, is out. So if you have Jake Moody as your starting kicker, don't just assume you can leave him out there. Make sure that you go out and you find someone else.
Matthew
Right, yeah.
All right, let's talk about the Seahawks. Seahawks also, honestly, kind of a chalky offense for fantasy football, guys.
Sort of, yeah, aside of one very notable position. But
So running back, Kenneth Walker III, obviously, is going to play a lot. He's been way more involved in the passing game of late because they didn't run the ball at all last week. He had 5 carries last week.
Yeah, it was
Insane. They've talked about
that was another one of them plays, though. They ran 12 plays in the first half or something?
They've talked about how they need to get that right in a hurry, so they will. I would not be surprised if they come out and they run the football a lot.
Good offense, yeah.
Good offense. DK has been great. He's locked in. These 2 wide receivers, what do you make of them, though?
Yeah, this is what's interesting
Jackson
because
Smith and Jigba versus Tyler Lockett.
Yeah.
Just not that it is heads one or the other necessarily.
I think it is. I think Smith and Jigba has a nice edge here. I do. I think he's
weird,
play.
though. Yeah.
But what's wild is that Geno Smith, look, they have 3 receivers that we like. So we were like, are they all going to be startable in fantasy? And the answer right now is that only one of them, DK Metcalf, is a lineup lock. And that's despite the fact that Geno Smith leads the NFL in pass attempts, pass completions, and passing yards.
Yep.
Yeah, we still aren't sure if we could trust these other guys. The reason I like JSN more is I know he's been only over 13 fantasy points once this season, but he has a 21% target share.
Yep.
He's second among receivers in routes, 8th in catches. The yards haven't been there. He only has 1 touchdown, but that overall usage has been pretty good. Also, the Niners have allowed the highest yards per reception to wide receivers this season, believe it or not, and the 7th highest yards per target. So receivers have gotten the job done against them so far, despite not a lot of volume. Tyler Lockett, on the other hand, 0 touchdowns and has yet to reach 14 fantasy points in a game. His target share has fallen to a career low 16%. So those, we've seen it from JSN. We've seen a big game. He's been on the field. The target share is more. He's ahead of Lockett on the depth chart. So I feel better about him as a wide receiver 3. Lockett, I don't know if he's a 12-team league flex.
This is such.
Agree. I've got wide receiver 34 for JSN and Tyler Lockett at wide receiver 40. The reason why it's like relatively close, despite all those things that Mike mentioned that seem to work in JSN's favor, and they're all accurate, by the way. He's run 198 routes so far this season. Is Lockett, despite being the clear number 3, has run 175 in 5 games. That's 35 a game. Like, that's a massive number in a single game. He's averaging that every single week because they're throwing the football a ton, as Mike said, and JSN is averaging under 9 yards per catch. Meanwhile, Lockett is at 12.5 yards per catch. So, and yes, the target share is low. It's 16%. Would you say is the career low for Tyler Lockett so far?
Easily, yeah. It's been trending
When you're
down
throwing the football so much, right? Like, he still has at least 6 targets in 4 of the 5 games. So it may be low, but that's why Tyler Lockett is still on the fantasy football radar, is because they're throwing the ball so much. And he's a good player, too.
It feels so weird to me because I had the same stat, right? QB1 in passing yards, pass attempts, pass completions. So you know that they are going out there and doing everything through the air. And it's basically those 3 guys because they don't throw the ball to the tight end position at all. Like, that's not just, it's just something that doesn't factor in. I know the running backs get a little of passing game work as a part of this offense too, but how can you have a quarterback throw the ball so much and complete so many of those passes for so many yards and only one wide receiver in what is a fairly tight target tree be a lineup block for us? It's kind of vexing, to be honest.
It is. It's crazy. Yeah, I mean, part of the reason, too, is they have not found the end zone nearly enough.
Yeah.
Those numbers.
5 passing touchdowns
a
for
lot
Geno
better
is
if
not
Geno
good.
had, even 8 as opposed to 5. It's an interesting one.
There is some reason for optimism here, though, especially with JSN. Like, the underlying stats sometimes will tell you that better days ahead. He's a couple good games, 1 or 2 huge games. We're going to feel really good about him as a lineup block at some point. And we've seen a huge game from him already this season. So that's interesting. And also, I want to, speaking of tight ends, keeping an eye on rookie A.J. Barner. There's a lot of 4th-round tight ends this year, and some guys are getting opportunities and
6th rounder.
starting to. Well, I thought he was 4th-rounder. Wasn't Barner a 4th-rounder?
I thought he was a 6th rounder.
He was 4th.
I just remember. I remember my grade on him being like, oh, interesting. Like, that's about.
They're starting to get him the ball a little bit, but he's not anywhere where you need him other than a deep dynasty. But Noah Fant just hasn't been a thing. It's just not happening there. So I wonder.
Good call, Mike.
Yes, I wonder if. Well, some of us cover the draft. We were there.
I was waiting for
was
that.
next
I
to
was
Mel.
waiting.
I was talking to Mel on the set, and we were just sharing notes and stuff. So, or no, wait, that was him doing that. That's weird.
That's strange. Yeah.
Wow,
Numerous
so
draft this
I
week,
got you.
though,
I got
right?
you on that, and I knew where Aaron Champlin went to college. I mean, maybe I'm taking your job.
Yeah, you guys were classmates at Harvard. Sweet. Way to brag about it. Bobo also tonight.
Yes,
Oh,
of course,
he's starting
obviously.
National TV spotlight. Just
Yeah, we'll
always
see.
gotta mention.
Maybe he'll outsnap Laviska Shenault this week, unlike last week. But we'll see.
Oh, that's another name. Yikes.
I feel like we're due for a random Seahawks wide receiver breakout tonight too.
Yeah.
Like,
I thought JSN was going to break out in that Lions game. I mean, with the way that worked. And again, the idea that Geno Smith threw for almost 400 yards, it felt like everything lined up for that to work out with the way that the Lions get beat.
oh, this is a Kyle Soppe stat. We love you, Kyle. Shout out to you. And he used to always come with these nuggets, and I'd be like, I don't even know how my brain would get there, but you're Kyle, and this is how you can do it. JSN in even number weeks so far this season. 14.5 targets per game.
Isn't that all from like one game though, where he had 19?
Yeah, 16 and 13, 14.5.
Look at that.
Yeah. Anyway,
So he's doing okay. All right. So that's how Mike feels
I
about it.
like
Mike is
stats, but I
disgusted.
like actionable stats, not terrible ones like that.
Well, it's an even week.
It's an even week, Mike.
If he's
I
definitely
say
getting
Jackson Smith-Njigba has over 10 targets tonight.
over 10. I'm not betting against that because I have him on a bazillion teams, and I want that to happen.
You can buy me lunch if he has at least 10 targets.
Okay, done. But yeah, by the way, nothing worse than those random people catching touchdowns.
Oh, it's the worst.
We love Jake Bobo, and I'll be happy for you if he scores a touchdown, but also I'm going to hate it. Like, we want JSN.
you
we
know
want
what?
Metcalf. We want
Dan,
Walker.
cut this kid's mic. That's shameful. Like, honestly,
Probably a kid. I'm older than him.
Yes.
you're a kid. I'm treating you like a kid right now when you disrespect the golden Hall of Famer one day.
That's right.
Golden Jacket legend, Jake Bobo. We don't stand for any kind of Jake Bobo.
No slander. No
None.
Bobo slander
I'll play
around
like
here.
I got your back. This guy doesn't.
In case you
You
want to
know what he
have a
probably
little-
will do? Catch 3 touchdowns.
Honestly, if that happens, I'm going to be thrilled. I can't. Our group chat's going to blow up if that happens.
Ooh.
Yeah, my
Mike stays
resume
up
this
to the
season
end.
on these random guys scoring touchdowns, absolutely.
Staying up for the game tonight, Mike?
Of course I am.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah, I'll bet you are. I'll bet.
I'm
you
on a streak right
I-
now.
Yeah.
5 straight.
You made it through Sunday,
5 straight primetime games.
including
All the way
the
to end.
late start, the delayed start.
Yeah, and you
Did
guys.
you really make it, or did you nap the whole game? And then
You did I text you at 12:51?
yeah, after the game was over.
You know what we
The
need?
game ended at 12:51.
We
Yeah,
need
but
to
you
have
slept
like
through most of it and then woke up for the end.
we need a camera feed on everyone's home setup so that we
Oh,
can
I have one.
really
It's
know.
called a Nanit. Yeah.
Okay, all right.
This is borrowed my Nanit. I use it for my kids.
That's it. We'll just log into Fields Nanit and make
Bluetooth
sure that he's
connection.
really
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, by the way, you want to know a secret? I absolutely did not make it through that game.
Of course not.
There's no way. That game was
It
ridiculous.
went until like 12:45
No way.
a.m.
I don't know. No way.
It went until 12:51. I time-stamped it. I texted you guys. What did I say? Literally the second Jalen Tolbert caught the touchdown. Tolbert, double exclamation points. And none of the, no response.
Yeah.
You didn't text throughout most of it when we were texting.
I know.
John,
Guys,
he was
I
in
said,
it.
Hey,
You
I'm
didn't-
gonna.
I thought he was sleeping.
ignore to. I was trying to make it like dramatic effect, and
I was out at halftime. I think I didn't.
I made it to the end of the third quarter, but I couldn't do. I shouldn't have moved to the bedroom and tried to finish.
That's
it
what I
there.
did. That's
Like,
the mistake I
that
made.
was
I'm
the
usually working
mistake.
through all of those games,
Yeah.
primetime games.
If you want to have a little extra fun in this one, we got a fantasy focus parlay for you as well. Brandon Ayuk and George Kittle and DK Metcalf each to record 60-plus receiving yards. Looking for some high volume here in this passing game. Was plus 525. Now it's plus 700.
so I have a question.
Over at ESPN Bet.
Question for you, if I may. Last week, if you had put money on the parlay,
Yes.
would you be rich?
It depends on how much money you put down, but yes.
Okay, right, because I believe it was Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and
Drake London.
catching a total of 3 touchdowns.
3+ touchdowns.
That happened.
Yes, it
In
did.
the first quarter.
In the first quarter.
Or first half.
Bam. Let's go.
I'm ready. I'm in on this. Who are you taking in this game? Can I ask that question?
The game is in Seattle,
In
right?
Seattle. I think I have I think I have the Niners.
This is like
I'll
close.
tell you right now, public, 71% on, and Pigskin Pick'em, 71% on the 49ers, 29% on the Seahawks.
I'm going to give the Niners a little edge here.
I'm taking the Seahawks.
I'm going with the Seahawks too. I don't know why.
Yeah. I don't know.
Can
It's
you
just,
imagine
there
the
is still
Niners
something
at
about
2-4? 2-4 with
Wow,
the
that is
Chiefs
wild.
on the other side of this matchup.
Dude,
Christian McCaffrey might be back next week if they lose this week.
they might need him back if that's the case. Yeah, that's
Someone wired that. I'm not the medical person. Tell you, when you're wired like we know he's wired,
What's Seattle now? 3-2? Didn't they lose 2
2.
straight?
Yeah, 3-2,
Lost
yeah.
to the Giants. Yeah, I'm going to go Niners. They get it done.
Seahawks. Yeah.
wow.
You're going so you think
Seahawks
Seahawks win and Niners go to 2-4? Wow, interesting.
Me too.
NFL is just chaos.
It is.
It's
It
just
really is. I would not have expected that. I would have not expected the Minnesota Vikings to be 5-0 at this point of the season. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Shout out to them, though. They've been absolutely unbelievable. Really frustrating, though, for a bunch of other teams.
Think about this week. We've spent all this time like on the Jets and how it's a mess, and they fired their coach and changed their play caller. They are, if they beat the Bills this week, they are tied for
place.
first in the AFC.
That's
East.
crazy. That's crazy.
Hilarious.
All right, that's going to do it for us today. Make sure you set your Thursday Night Football lineup. Today's show is presented by Boost Mobile. Don't forget to love each other. Be kind to yourself. Have fun watching Thursday Night Football. We'll see you guys on Friday.